Well, thank you, Letitia, for the invitation. I feel this is a little bit of payback maybe because all those assessment items I set you. And so this is your way of recruiting me, getting some of your own back. But it's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for your warm welcome so far. I really appreciated being part of the discussion a little earlier. And I look forward to sharing my thoughts, some of God's thoughts about this topic of connection. And as I've labelled it today, how we are hardwired for connection. I'm not really a super practical person. I'm more of a conceptual person. Here a number of years ago, my wife and I, Anne-Marie, and by the way, she sends her apologies. She was hoping to be here today. We decided to take a huge risk. We decided that we would become owner builders, home builders. And this was in Yass, just outside Canberra. Had a little plot of land. We decided we'd build our own house. And so in order to save money, I decided I'd get my hands dirty. Luckily, there was a very experienced carpenter that I worked alongside, and I learned how to hang gyprock. I learned how to put cladding on. I did a whole lot of painting. Painting is the worst job. It takes forever and ever. It's eternity to paint a house. But there are some jobs, obviously, you do need the professionals. Have you ever tried to do plumbing without a professional? It turns pretty ugly. So the professionals came in to do jobs like plumbing and do the electrical. I had a friend who was a qualified electrician. And so we did that whole process together. We sat down and he even drew out a map of where switches and lights would go. We went to the shop and bought all the switches, power points, the different types of lights, even laid the main cable and he connected that. Then it came to a point in the building of the house where everything was ready and he said, what I like to do as an electrician is have this ritual, and it's where we flick the mains power to the house and we turn all the light switches on before we do that. We do it at night, and so it's a bit of a whiz-bang event watching all these lights come on. And so we went to this house that we were building and he flicked the main switch and all the lights lit up in the house. And from outside, with the windows open, no blinds at that point, this house came alive. There was a particular glow about the house. I think that's what connection is. It's like this life force, and it's a beautiful thing and it's a powerful thing. Have you ever stood on top of a mountain? Now, I'm not really fit, so by the time I get to the top of a mountain, I'm huffing and panting and hoping I don't have a heart attack. But once you get to the top of a mountain, there is an absolutely beautiful view, a panorama, if you like. Have you ever looked up at the night sky while staying in the country? When you're in the city, you don't get the same effect. But in the night sky, in the country, there's just so many stars. There's a vastness about the night sky. Or have you ever been in the middle of a eucalyptus forest and looked up at the enormity of the trees? Connecting with nature stirs ancient and deep forces within us, plugs us into the transcendent, reminds us how small we are, and at the same time, how we are part of something so big and enormous. Connections are also beautiful in the interpersonal domain in the social world. Watching a mother interact with their baby or their toddler and the goo-garing that occurs, the communication that happens, there's not even words. Or children playing together, they kind of sort it out and no one tells them how to play together. A couple in love holding hands or staring into each other's eyes as though they're melting into one another. Or a toddler hugging their grandparents. There's something special about grandparents. Observing these types of experiences leaves us with warm fuzzies and emotional afterglow. And neuroscientists, people that study the brains, know that when we see something, when we see other people hugging or when we see other people connecting, the same part of our brain is activated and lights up that is used for us connecting. So we get to experience what they're experiencing. Connection is a wonderful thing amongst human beings. It's a beautiful thing to watch. It's a delightful thing to experience. But here is the thing. Human connection is not just a nice experience. It's not just the icing on the cake, so to speak. It is absolutely essential for us. We rely on connection in ways we don't understand. And in fact, God has hardwired us for this type of connection. Due to technology and clever brain scans, we can now watch a baby's brain develop, a toddler's brain grow. And what we've found out, it's not just nutrition that's important, but toddlers require a connection. They require a relationship. And we call this attachment in my field, in order for the brain to grow, in order for the physical architecture of the brain to develop. Children need relationships. And that's the thing, as human beings, we're able to develop this thing called relationships, which is like layers and layers of connection. Sometimes they're very thin layers, but as they build up over time, there are these deep bonds that work and that create these relationships. It's not just toddlers who rely on relationships. It's also children and adults who require connection for their mental health and well-being. Because you see, relationships provide a sense of belonging. They remind us that we are not alone, that we have a tribe who can back us up and support us when things get tough. And relationships act as a buffer. We have people to share life with. So not only do relationships help keep us well, they also add meaning and purpose. We have lots of fun experiences that make life worthwhile. This is the interesting thing though. We kind of knew that for a while and science was showing that, but latest research shows something else. Relationships, healthy relationships, are correlated with our physical health. There's this research that was done a number of years ago, and it said, okay, let's look at why some places in the world have so many people live to 100. And they called these blue zones. And believe it or not, one of those blue zones is a group of Adventists in Loma Linda. And in these places, there's one in Italy, there's one in Japan, one in South America, California, can't remember where the other one is. But in these places, people seem to live to an old age and they're quite healthy. And there are a large number of people, 100 or 100 plus. And the researchers found 9 contributing factors. And as you'd expect, it's about keeping active and sometimes it's about diet, but there were 2 social factors. In these places, people tend to prioritise family. They invest a lot in their spouses and their children. There are strong family connections. They also tend to have a small group or a tribe of about 5 or 6 friends that they do life with, who support them, who they talk to, who they share with. There was another piece of research by Julianne Holt-Lunstad at a university in England. And what she did, she took these middle-aged people, which is me because I turned 50 last year, and then she started checking in with them every 7 years. Sounds a bit morbid, but she wanted to see why some people had passed away and why some people were still alive as they went from middle-aged into old age. And it's really fascinating what she found, because we would expect that those who exercised every morning, those that had a vegan diet, all these kind of healthy things would be still alive. But what she found was that, in fact, the diet, exercise, weight were low predictors of being alive or staying alive. Even things like lower levels of alcohol consumption and smoking were moderately associated with still being alive. The two top variables for predicting that people would still be alive after 7 years were social factors. How close your relationships were, the quality of your relationships, as well as how much interaction you had on a daily basis. So even something like your physical health, which we think is primarily about what you eat and exercise, is about the social connection. Susan Johnson, a bit of a marriage and family guru in the relationship realm, in her writing, she talks about, and she gives lots of evidence that explains why an intimate, close relationship is so protective to our physical and mental well-being. Connections and relationships are core to our development, our mental health, our well-being, and even our physical health. Relationships, social connections, and interactions with others are not optional extras. They're essential because we're hardwired for connection. But as Christians, we know there is another type of connection that's just as important, and that is a relationship with God is vital for our spiritual well-being. This provides a sense of meaning, especially in light of suffering, death, and chaos. And there's a lot of that around at the moment. It also provides a moral compass, a map for how to live our lives, along with our salvation and restoration. Encountering God, encountering the divine, leaves us transformed, changed in a profound way. And I'll come to the story of Zacchaeus in another few minutes, but did you notice what Zacchaeus did after he'd encountered Jesus? It transformed his value system, his life, his approach, the way he was treating people. In Exodus 34, verse 29, this is when Moses had been up on the mountain with God, getting the tablets. So that's Exodus 34, verse 29. We get another insight into how communing with God is transformational. So when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. So because Moses had been interacting with the Lord, with God, that spiritual power, that force, the evidence of that connection was on his face.